What's going on, fight fans? I'm back here with another video here set for you guys. Gonna be going and giving my recap and reaction to the UFC Apex event, UFC Vegas 104. And just looking up and down on this card, seeing the names that we had, very, very uninteresting. But thankfully, usually most of the times, these cards that have really nobody on them, they actually turn out to be kind of banger cards. So shout out to not shout out to the UFC because obviously these cards are horrendous, but shout out to the fighters for actually making the fights worthwhile to actually be wanting to watch them and keep watching them, even though again they have nobody really on them of note. Starting on with Unetsi Duben versus Carly Judice. Not much really to be able to say about this fight if we're going to be honest about it. Carly Judice gets a beautiful highlight reel head kick KO right on the button on Duben and puts her ass out. Absolutely fantastic to be able to see something like that. Usually in WMMA, we don't get any type of KOs, so to be able to see a head kick KO of this fashion was absolutely tremendous to be able to see. So Carly Judice and her stock absolutely goes up, especially as the prospect as she is. Especially again, seeing the striking capabilities that she was able to display with the absolutely disgusting head kick KO. And speaking of KOs in WMMA, moving on up the card, we had Josiane Nunez versus Priscilla Cachoeira. Really, I mean, if you look on paper, if you thought somebody was going to get flatline KO in this fight, you would have thought Josiane Nunez would have been able to put Priscilla, this gal, if that's what you want to be able to call her. I mean, look at her. Much of a word to be able to say as gal. You thought that, especially with the power, especially on the feet, what she has, she would have been able to put her out. But Priscilla, just right on the button in an exchange, has a right hand right on the chin and puts Josiane Nunez out cold. So we have back to back KOs, back to back finishes, back to back KO finishes for WMMA. We start off this card absolutely tremendous, and the fight flaggers for WMMA who actually want to continue watching these type of fights, they have something to sink their teeth in because actually there's something to be able to look forward to now that potentially whenever you watch a WMMA fight, especially the size of looking at Priscilla Cachoeira, we know you kind of just look at her and you think and then you see it and then it happens and then okay. She's one of those Amandas, especially being from Brazil. But again, highlight KO for her, coming in as the underdog against Josiane Nunez, who was somebody to be able to just kind of like, I guess, march forward against Priscilla. So shout out to her. She puts herself in a winning record, puts herself against potentially somebody else that could be able to be a heavy hitter in the division that she's in. But yeah, shout out to her. And moving on up the card, we had my boy Andre Lima is back, and he went against Daniel Barras. Ever since I seen the fight of Andre Lima go against a dude that like bit his arm and got disqualified, and he was absolutely piecing him up on the feet, I knew that Andre Lima was going to be absolutely something to be able to worry about, especially on the feet. Dude is kind of known to being a sniper, and his just striking game is just on another level, and he put an absolute masterclass of a performance against Daniel Barras. I mean, every single level, he was chopping the low kicks, just messing up Daniel's lead leg. The right hook to the body was absolutely demoralizing, leaving Daniel Barras' side right on the body, right where that, not where the liver is, it's obviously on the other side, but on the other side of that body was just a red marking up, and he was bloodying up Daniel Barras, just absolutely doing whatever he wanted to be able to do on the feet. It was an absolute masterclass. Then gets the takedown, and then in the late second round he gets the takedown, and then it's kind of like a thing of where can he be able to get the finish. This would really propel him in a way a lot better instead of it just kind of riding out and it being a decision victory. He gets again another takedown in the third round, lands some ground and pound, trying to just wear on Daniel Barras, who's actually really happy to be on the ground instead of being on the feet because he was getting absolutely chopped up. And while he was on the ground, going into later or mid round of the third, the boy Andre Lima cinches in a rear naked choke, his first ever submission victory and first ever submission in the UFC. So really nice to be able to see that he has more of a complete game, especially his last time out. I think his performance was kind of So it was really nice to be able to see him bounce back, get a nice victory against decent comp. Daniel Barnes is actually a pretty tough out. I mean, on the feet. I mean, anybody else is going to get absolutely rocked on their ass and get out of there. So shout out to the toughness for Daniel Barnes, but Andre Lima calling out the best striker in the flyweight division. I mean, he just got a victory, like it was like last week. Joshua Van, absolute banger of a matchup if the UFC put that up there. But I don't want to see that as of right now because I absolutely love both of those prospects. So it's kind of hard to be able to, fight for one guy's side. But Andre Lima, man, showing absolute class, showing absolute well-roundedness, and showing that he has some capabilities with the stuff in grappling and wrestling and getting the jiu-jitsu in well. So shout out to Andre Lima. Hopefully he's going to be able to get a bump up in the flyweight division. Would love to be able to see that and more comp for him. So yeah, moving on up the card, we had Stephanie Luciano versus Sam Hughes. Man, this one was a tough one to be able to call, for being completely honest. Sam Hughes came out like she was shot out of a cannon, just on fire, just coming in forward, bringing a lot of pressure to Luciano that I think kind of caught Luciano off guard early in this fight. And while she had a lot of success with the stand-up, then towards like the middle, and then once things started to simmer down a little bit more, Luciano started to get a little bit more comfortable. It was very, very even on the feet, in my opinion. Very tit for tat. Really, honestly, Stephanie Luciano's technique was really, really impressive to me. She, even when tired, especially later in the fight, when I go later into the rounds, she really impressed me with her technique. It was absolutely fantastic. But still, in this first round, Sam Hughes get a couple of takedowns. And while she doesn't really do much with it. So while it's still kind of leaning towards Hughes' way because she's still having success on the feet, and so is Luciano. But take into consideration the takedowns, then you move to like the last minute of the first round, and Luciano is absolutely just pouring it on Sam Hughes, just doing whatever she wanted to be able to do, landing the low kicks, landing upstairs, and she's starting to get into a rhythm and start really outclassing Sam Hughes. So I gave that first round to Stephanie Luciano. Then you move into the second round, she carries that momentum from the end of the first round, just completely outclassing Sam Hughes on the first feet for like the first 2 minutes of the second round, doing exactly what she was doing, just having the technique, having some power, some sting on the end of her shots. But then Sam Hughes then gets the takedown, and when she does get the takedown, she has cinched in a nasty rear naked choke. I have no idea how she wasn't able to tap, that being Stephanie Luciano. And while she doesn't tap, Sam Hughes stays upon her, just starts to grind her way with some ground and pound, having the dominant position, having the top control, and then starts to land some nasty ground and pound, some elbows right on the face of Stephanie Luciano towards the end of the second round. So while I agree, and not that I agree, but I can understand as to why they gave it a 10-8 round to Sam Hughes. One of the judges, I believe, gave it a 10-8 round to Sam Hughes. I can understand how it's a 10-9 because there's a lot of other dominant grappling rounds that they give it like a 10-9 when it should be a 10-8. So the scoring is not as consistent as it really needs to be able to be. But this is the UFC. This is MMA. This happens all the time. It's absolutely egregious that we're still talking about this, if we're being honest. Then you move into the third round. Stephanie Luciano then stuffs some takedowns. Having some success on the feet, having some good work in the clinch, and you can definitely tell that the power is completely out of her punches. A lot of arm punches, very, very laboring shots from her. And while she is trying to keep up, she is putting on a pace. She was throwing a lot more shots. She landed a lot more shots than Sam Hughes, in my opinion. She stuffed the takedowns from Sam Hughes. So I gave the round to Stephanie Luciano because she just outworked her, even though she was gassed and she had nothing on her punches. While I can understand if you give it a 10-8 round to Sam Hughes in the second round, it's a draw, or if you give it a 10-9, you edged it to Stephanie Luciano, but I do think it was kind of a robbery giving it to Sam Hughes. That first round was very, very competitive, and yes, she was catching and countering a lot of the shots, and she was having some success on the feet, and she got 2 takedowns, but she didn't really do anything on it. And again, while the end of that first round was very, very competitive, she didn't really do much, and she was starting to get outclassed on the feet in that first first round. So I don't know, a draw, or I was leaning toward Luciano, but I definitely don't think that Sam Hughes won that fight. And moving on up the card, we had Carlos Vera versus Josias Musasa. Was pretty much just going to be a prospect watching or a showcasing for Josias Musasa coming off of the Contender Series, him getting the contract to go into the UFC, him being from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, is known for having a lot of power. I mean, they kept saying that throughout the commentary, that his power in his hands, his bones in his hands were absolutely huge. So he carries a lot of power. He's knocking all these people out. And then you have Carlos Vera coming off this performance where he was injured and he just stayed on his back and he looked very weak and he looked very bad. Uh, and Carlos Vera, came out, and shout out to him, put on a actually great performance. Was on the feet, showing off his taekwondo skills. His kicks were absolutely very, very quick, very, 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 very well placed. I'll give him that. I'll give him credit on that. It was actually really impressive to be able to see that from Carlos Vera. I mean, from his last outing, he looked like an absolute geek. And while he was really, really showing a good performance. He landed a really, really nice, we saw it last week, spinning wheel kick right, not on the button, but it landed and it got Josias Mosasa's attention 100%. I wouldn't say that it wobbled him, but I mean, it landed, and somehow, some way, he actually took it on the chin. But that kind of just showed, like, yeah, this is not the way that Josias Musasa is supposed to be looking. I mean, he has a chin. Shout out to him because he actually, took it well. But, as a prospect, and this being a showcase against somebody that, looked so weak in his last outing, you kind of don't want him to be able to take shots like that or have the defensive capabilities to be able to defend shots like that. And it came to bite Josias Musasa's ass later in the fight, because then after that, while Carlos Vera was throwing a combination similar to like the Leon Edwards KO, he lands a nice head kick over the top while he had his right hand extended, and it just lands right on the button on Josias Musasa, has him wobbled, puts him down. Then after that, Carlos Vera goes in while Musasa is on the ground, gets the rear naked choke, submission over him. And I mean, wow, man, great performance. Another submission, another finish on this card, and we just continue to build and build and build. So great performance out of Carlos Vera. And I don't know, Dominic Reyes was talking about how I want to see how he does after this performance. This might have been a fraud check type of performance out of Josias Musasa. I mean, they kept talking about his power so much that I didn't really see much. I mean, he did land a couple of few good shots that, maybe stung Carlos Vera, but not to the point where, they completely just flatlined out on the canvas. But anyways, moving on up the card, we have Su Young Yu versus AJ Cunningham, the partner, the brother of Bryce Mitchell. I mean, Su Young Yu. I'm sorry, guys. I was really bad. I'm trying to be able to pronounce this dude's name. He really just did whatever he wanted to be able to do against AJ Cunningham. Whether it be on the feet, he outclassed him. Even though I did like some of the techniques and some of the kicks that AJ Cunningham, that was actually kind of flashy, nice to be able to see, but he didn't really land much. Was getting outpointed on the feet. The footwork, the speed was absolutely on the showcase for Su Young. He, again, just outclassed him in every single capabilities. And, him training with Bryce Mitchell and him being dominated on the grappling like that was kind of like a thing to be able to be like, like, again, Bryce Mitchell and his credentials with his grappling and his jiu-jitsu is, incredible. But, you're training with him, you kind of think that he's able to get out of these bad positions that Su Young has him. Or maybe I'm just underrated Su Young Yu. But, yeah, I mean, again, just whether it be on the ground, whether it be threatening with submissions and it being on the feet. And obviously you can tell by these dudes' faces if you look at it on your screen as I have it pictured above for you. Su Young Yu, excuse me, did what he needed to be able to do to get the victory. Not much to be able to say about this fight. But AJ Cunningham, I mean, he did I will say, shout out to AJ Cunningham. He did threaten time and time here and there. He had an arm in triangle. He tried with the guillotines and here and there, but not much success besides that. And moving on to the headliner of the prelims, we had Waldo Cortez Acosta versus Ryan Spann. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I thought this was going to be able to save the career of Ryan Spann, bring some type of consistency, bring some type of foundation to him to be able to move forward and have more success for himself. But he just looked absolutely terrible out there. Waldo Cortez Acosta, the number 12 ranked heavyweight, which we know is a division that's known for these big flabby guys that are not really well. Waldo Cortez Acosta has been dominated on the ground, and he beat Red de Spain, who's absolutely looking tremendous in karate combat. But in his UFC career, he got beat by Austin Lane, who just got flatline KO. So yeah, I mean, even me, I didn't make a prediction video, but I thought Ryan Spann was able to get the victory over Waldo Cortez. But was I completely wrong? I mean, Waldo Cortez Acosta just outclassed Ryan Spann and made Ryan Spann look like an absolute bitch out there. It was really bad. I mean, Ryan Spann, duly so, yes, he was getting fouled a lot in like the second and first round with the eye pokes here and there, and getting kicked to the nuts. I completely understand, you know what I mean? But it was just looking bad. The body language, the complaining, the absolute just looking over to the ref to be able to want him to do something over and over again. And Ryan Spann, yes, he was landing a few nice shots. He, was landing his low kick pretty effectively in the first round. He landed some nice right hands over the top against Waldo Cortez Acosta. But as being a heavyweight, Cortez Acosta ate the shots pretty well against, people that he's fought, that being Ryan Spann in the light heavyweight division, who probably gets touched that on the chin, and they probably get out of it. They probably get hurt and wobbled pretty bad. And Cortez Acosta just continued to just walk him down, land the jabs, land these right hands over the top, and continuously had Ryan Spann on the back foot, wobbling him, making him look absolutely like a fool, just stumbling all over the place. Even when he's throwing shots and missing bad, he's just looking. He just looked. It was a really bad, really bad performance for Ryan Spann. And while the jab just continuously started to land for Waldo Cortez Acosta, he came in with the jab and over the top landed a solid left hook right on the button, right on the chin of Ryan Spann. Sits him down, lands some nice ground and pound, and Ryan Spann is out on the canvas. And Waldo Cortez Acosta keeps his ranking, has a nice victory over against a lighter man skill type of guy, Ryan Spann, who's kind of known, he has some type of wrestling credentials and his grappling is okay. But he couldn't be able to do anything against Waldo Cortez Acosta when I actually thought this would have been the run for him to be able to go through the heavyweight division. And honestly, that is something that's not going to happen because Ryan Spann looked really bad in this fight. But shout out to Waldo Cortez Acosta. He's actually could potentially make his way maybe to the top 10. I wouldn't mind him seeing against like a Tybura or a Spivak. That would be a pretty decent matchup for him to be able to get his name maybe in the ring as a potential contender in the heavyweight division because they don't really have any, honestly, if we're being honest right now. But anyways, moving on to the first fight on the main card. We had Sing Woo Choi versus Kevin Vallejos. And while the featherweight division believed that they got away from the boogeyman known as Ilia Topuria, who is moving away from the 145-pound division, moving to the lightweight division at 155, we might have just found his replacement and found the Walmart version of Ilia Topuria in the embodiment of Kevin Vallejos because, oh my God, he looks like an absolute carbon copy of what Ilia Topuria is. If you wanted to have the short, stocky build, boxing ability, moving his head off the center line, continuously walking forward with very, very precise pressure, eating shots. I mean, Soo Choi, his defense, that being Kevin Vallejos' defense, was pretty all right, but he was getting some shots landed on him here and there. Was very, very tactical and very economical with his output. Didn't really put out a lot out there, but was really looking for counters and trying to time Sing Woo Choi to really get him and press him back on the back foot. But he's not Ilya Taporia. The reason why I said he's a Walmart version is because the technique, in my opinion, is not there. Swings a little bit too wild for me, in my opinion. Can be open here and there, but the head movement, really just the style and how he just looks exactly like in Ilya. And while he does, and he has the power and the ability such as in Ilya in the 145-pound division, he absolutely timed Sengwoo Choi beautifully. Has the overhand right hand right on the button, landing beautifully, knocking Choi down, getting him out with some ground and pound right on the fence, and getting the job done. And then also after that, he calls out Gene Silva, somebody who he fought on the Contender Series, which was a very, very close fight. The dude's already just 23 years old. Is a young kid, man, has a lot to be able to go through his career. And as we see right now, Gene Silva's on an absolute roll, going to be going into the rankings as of right now. Vallejos still has some way to go, in my opinion, to be able to reach somebody like a Gene Silva right now, who's kind of has his name everywhere, especially with the Bryce Mitchell matchup that he has for the UFC 314 card. Absolutely, I'm hands down ready to be able to see that rematch. That rematch would be an absolute banger. They push themselves to the absolute brink between these two guys. And Kevin Vallejos, I mean, yeah, the featherweight division. You have your Walmart version of Ilya Taporia. He is back in your division again. So stay alert and be worried, because I'm pretty sure he's going to be able to do similar things to what he did to Sungwoo Choi to a lot of the unranked contenders in the 145 division. Moving on up the card, we have Dr. Nugoze versus Brendanson Ribeiro. Dr. is a guy who's from Kazakhstan, from the same area as the Shavkat, as most of the caucus type of members, who we obviously always type of worry about. Has had an undefeated record, another prospect that the UFC is trying to be able to push against Brendan Ribeiro, who's coming off a nice victory. And Brendanson Ribeiro, from the onset, was just completely outclassing Dr. on the feet, the leg kicks, the boxing, everything that you wanted to be able to see. He was making Dr. look like an absolute amateur out there. It was amateur hour for him. And Brendanson Ribeiro, really, I mean, there's not really much to be able to say. I mean, Dr. kept doing this weird thing where he kept like flashing his hands over his like eye, because I guess there was something in there that was bothering him or something like that. I don't know if it was, but he just consistently was doing it, and he looked like an absolute damn fool out there. And Dr., while he did get finished and he did get submitted, if he does stay in the UFC and he does continue fighting at higher levels, he has this like stupid thing that he does, that whenever there's like a kick or a punch coming his way, he like throws his hands up, like for whatever reason. Like he throws his hands up and he goes and he moves straight back in a straight line, like if he's like in a damn roller coaster or something. Like, brother, what? You keep your hands, guarding yourself, because if Brendanson Ribeiro had the capabilities of putting in a combination, having Dr. just continue walking back, and he's just flailing his arms out there, and he lands something over the top, he would have knocked him out, regardless of the fact he still got to finish over him. But he does this like this absolutely idiot, moronic thing. Like I really don't understand why he does it, but. Anyways, I'm glad that he got finished in the second round. Brendanson Ribeiro gets, the takedown, moves and gets the top control, gets a nice Kimura submission victory over Dr. Nurgorze, and he gets fraud checked. I mean, 10-0 from Kazakh. You have the hype, you have the build. UFC's trying to push you, and you look absolutely terrible in every aspect. Brendanson Ribeiro completely outclassed him in every which way. And moving on up the card, we have Damon Blackshear versus Cody Gibson. And, man, shout out to Cody Gibson, man, because he came out like a bat out of hell in that first round, just completely just running forward against Damon Blackshear, catching him off guard, kind of sleeping, really, if we're going to be honest. And he was really effective with getting some, good combinations in with the low kicks, pressing forward and getting Damon towards the cage. And while he had some clinch work was doing really well with the clinch work to the body, to the head, got some takedowns, didn't really do much with it, but was really just pressing forward and really looking good and dominant. And then over time, Damon then got some top control, had some grappling success himself, got some submissions, and started to threat against Cody Gibson, and really had Cody really worried about it. But I would have gave that first round if it would have went to a finish to Cody Gibson, because he was just from the onset just trying to be able to stamp his flag to be able to say that, yeah, this is a fight that I want to be able to win. Moving into the second round, Damon just looked completely different. He was actually like looked lasered in focus to be able to get this victory. Was looking a lot sharper and better on the feet. Then started to get into some scrambles and some clinch work, get some nice work with the top control, not some nice ground and pound over Cody Gibson, starting to really dominate and wear on Cody Gibson. And just like in the last fight, in the Brendan Ribeiro, gets another Kimura submission victory against Cody Gibson, who looked really good in the first round. In the second round, he put on a real nice pace, had some things for Damon Blackshear to worry about, and Damon weathered through the storm and got through adversity. So it's really good for him to be able to see that. And get him, on a nice win, because I do think that Damon Blackshear is actually a very underrated fighter, and especially against Cody Gibson, somebody who's kind of like a gatekeeper type of guy. So nice for Damon to get on winning ways and continue him on the path that he's going forward. And to the future fight, we move on up the card. We have Alexander Hernandez versus Kurt Hollabaugh. And wow, this fight was an absolute scrap. Well, the first two rounds were an absolute scrap. These guys were just going at it in that first round. Really, really nice to be able to see that. These guys were really like, it wasn't even really tit for tat. These guys were actually landing very nice, solid shots, nice power shots, nice combinations, just coming in, whether it be Hollabaugh or Hernandez. They were really putting it on each other. And while it was staying competitive and while nobody was really taking control over the round, I did like how Hollabaugh essentially flash knocked down Alexander Hernandez, and then while Alexander Hernandez towards the end of the first round was fishing for a takedown, he cinched in a nice guillotine choke on him, threatening but nothing really to be able to worry about, honestly. And then you move on to the second round. In that first round, in my honest opinion, for those things, and while it being so close and competitive, I gave it to Hollabaugh. Then again, like I said, moving on to the second round, Hollabaugh was starting to really press his way with the kickboxing, just looking like he was starting to outclass Alexander Hernandez, really putting on the pressure, really starting to hurt him with all the combinations and everything that he was throwing his way. And then Alexander Hernandez gets the takedown towards like the middle end of the second round. He has dominant control, has top control, does work. But not work that's like dominant enough for him to be able to win the round. I understand how they could be able to give him the round, but in my honest opinion, how I look at things and how inconsistent they are with their scoring, I would have gave the round to Kurt Hollabaugh based on damage. But I'm not mad about giving the round to Alexander Hernandez. And then you move into the third round, 100% Alexander Hernandez wins that round, gets a takedown, has the control. Then after a scramble and Kurt Hollabaugh is able to get away and try to be able to have things on the feet, Alexander Hernandez gets another takedown, more top control, more dominant positions, and him just completely outright winning the round. So it was a very close fight, in my opinion. I gave the first round to Hollabaugh. Third round absolutely goes to Hernandez. Second round, I would have leaned toward more Hollabaugh, but I can definitely see how they gave the round and fight to Hernandez, that being 29-28 to Hernandez. But there was one scorecard that was 30-27 to Hernandez. I thought that was absolutely atrocious, because I think you had to be able to give that first round to Hollabaugh if we're going to give anybody that round. But yeah, I wouldn't say absolute robbery, but that scorecard 30-27 was absolutely atrocious to Hernandez. And moving on to the co-main event, we have Chidi Nujunchukwu versus Elidze Zelitsky dos Santos. Well, Chidi gets it done, man. Chidi absolutely got it done. In that first round, he was creating the distance, having that teep kick that was absolutely doing all the work for him, having the distance, having Dos Santos on the ring side, cage side, excuse me, just being along that side, trying to be able to have some burst, have some momentum here and there where he lands some big shots, try to be able to get a takedown, try to be able to push Njokuani back. But Chidi, man, was just doing work, bro. He just continued to stay forward, continued to stay on the gas, bringing some smartly intellectual pressure, not just going absolutely haywire, whatever he's going to be able to throw. But he did what he needed to be able to do, and then you move into the second round. He gets the knee right on the button, right on the chin, KO. So really nice to be able to see that from him. He's on a, I believe, 3 or 4 fight win streak as of right now. He's absolutely doing work in the 170-pound division, especially at his size and his frame and the way that he's able to fight, especially with his Muay Thai style. I can see him being a problem for a lot of fighters. He called for the top 15. I don't think he's close, but he's not that close. I would definitely want to see a matchup between him and like Randy Brown. That would be something that would be absolutely awesome to be able to see. Or maybe him, Brian Battle, or Oban Elliott. Guys that are just barely outside the rankings or just barely in the rankings would be a tremendous, type of matchup that they can be able to make in the UFC. So Chidi Njokuani gets an absolute highlight reel KO with the knee right up the middle, right on the button against Dos Santos. And regardless of the fact he was dominating the fight and absolutely doing the most work in them. And on to the main event we had. Marvin Vettori versus Roman Dolidze 2. The rematch between these two guys in the first matchup. Marvin Vettori, in my opinion, in the later rounds, in the second and third round, I think he outclassed Roman Dolidze in terms of the striking because Roman Dolidze was really, really bad with his striking like a few years ago in that fight against Marvin Vettori. And he has consistently, started to show more improvement. He's starting to show that he's leveled up. And in this matchup, you can absolutely see it. You can absolutely see the improvements that he's made on the game, especially with his stand-up. Marvin Vettori is coming on a long layoff. I think like a year and a half he's been out. Last time we saw him was Jared Cannonier fight where he absolutely stunned Cannonier in that first round. Looked like he was on his way to be able to get a finish against Cannonier, but then getting absolutely demolished by Cannonier for the rest of the fight. I don't know how he was able to stand and take all those shots on the chin. But Marvin Vettori is an absolute freaking ogre. He just walks through anything that he's able to go through. It's absolutely insane. But these two guys, they matched up again, and really they were similarly just matched up even more. As you can tell with Roman Dolidze making the improvements on his game, he wasn't getting outclassed like how he was in the first fight. Roman Dolidze, he was doing really good in the first round. I thought you could have gave it to Dolidze, but Vettori was outstriking him in that first round. Keeping it competitive. The low kicks were there all throughout the fight. It was money for him. In the second round, I think Dolidze did outwork Vettori. He started to put on this pressure and started to put on this pace and starting to really walk down Vettori. In the third round, Vettori landed a nice left right on the button against Dolidze that really seemed to sting him really bad. In the moment, it didn't look like it stung him bad, but Vettori noticed it, better than obviously. I mean, he's in the cage with the guy. Started to really wobble him. He started to land more nice shots, so I gave that round to Vettori. In the fourth round, I think Dolidze really had a nice bounce back round, landed a nice knee right on the button, landing the spinning elbow on Vettori, started to really walk him down, just spamming head kicks, at will, to just keep busy and keep Vettori at bay and walking back. In the fifth round, I think Vettori came out really strong in the beginning first minute in that fifth. Then started to fade. There was like a lull in action, and while Dolidze was walking Vettori down, he didn't really throw or do much. And then, Vettori started to land a few nice pot shots here and there, but then Dolidze just then took over. Even though he didn't really land much shots, he did land a few shots here and there. He was just starting to overwhelm him with the volume. And again, while it wasn't landing, he was just a busier fighter, and he just looked the fresher out of the two, and he looked like the absolute winner. If you were going to give somebody the win, it would have been Dolidze. So the improvements for him on the stand-up absolutely were showcased in this fight. He was able to not just be a right-hand fighter. I mean, because before Dolidze's striking was absolutely atrocious. I mean, absolutely like one of the worst striking in the UFC. And he's worked really hard. Both of these guys, kind of powerhouse fighters, really similar fighters, in my opinion. Dolidze probably going to be in the top 10 now, even though he's not really a great fighter. Neither is Vettori. Vettori is good. He's well rounded, and so is Dolidze. Even though I do think that Dolidze is a lot better on the ground compared to Vettori, but Vettori is just a tank of a dude. Um, but yeah, wasn't the greatest. Wasn't the most entertaining, but it was mid. It was okay. It was decent. It was whatever. But Dolidze gets the victory, calls out Whitaker or Adesanya. Adesanya is like on like what like a no, he's not on a. Well, he's on like a 2 fight losing. Is he? No, he's on a 3 fight losing streak as of right now, which is absolutely insane. So maybe a bounce back fight against Dolidze. He gets a nice victory. You have Whitaker, who's been out for some time. Since the Hamza Chimaev fight where he got his jaw absolutely collapsed on. Maybe he can be able to get a nice comeback victory over Dolidze. Either way, regardless of that happening, either of those fighters, I think, whoop on Dolidze and put a showcasing on Dolidze. But Dolidze's game, he's all right. He's better than what he was before, but he's still not much. But yeah, that was the fight card of UFC Vegas 104. Obviously, like this video if you like the video. Comment your opinions on what you think about the card. A lot of finishes, a lot of submissions, a lot of KOs. Really nice to be able to see. That's what you really want out of a Apex event. Is you just want it to move forward really nicely and efficiently. Just continue to go on. Get some highlight KOs. Get some nice subs. Get the finishes going. See some prospects here and there. And yeah. Um, Subscribe, UFC fans, MMA fans, if you want to continue to be able to watch this absolutely beautiful content that I have for you guys consistently. That also being consistently. Yeah, I have it for you guys, and you guys have exactly what I need, and that being that subscribe button. So that means we have a mutual partnership relationship between each other that we absolutely need. Thank you guys again for watching again, and peace.